listening to Adventure Party for the 3rd week of April 2023. This week, we have 12 years of deep podcasting lore that we have to stay true to. But what if we just made up an entire new episode from nothing? The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr.
And I'm Dave. And the eternal debate, continues of how much should be in a setting. Should it be, filled out ahead of time, so the GM has but to cast their eye upon it? That is the detail I shall use. Or should it be, should it have more gaps for creativity, where I can create my own thing here? Warlord, what do you think?
Sadly, I think we've once again trod upon the blessed grounds of there is probably no correct answer. But I think it's less that, philosophically there's no right answer, and more that people tend to have strong preferences one way or the other.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I generally find that there are. I'm not gonna say GMs. I'm gonna say people, because that's another thing we need to circle around to again. But there are people for whom, we'll deem lore for now. We have had previous episodes on lore, but in this specific context, there are people for whom there being extra tabular lore, something that is objective beyond the group that's sitting around them, that has a certain level of value, that there is a definite objectivity on having something from the book that is definitely true, and we don't need to worry about. Whereas others will embrace our ideas are here. We have put our ideas into all of this, and through doing that, we have made something personal that we control, and is our creativity, our at the table play and decisions that have molded what our play experience the way we want it. And as with a lot of these things, I would imagine a lot of people sort of want a bit of both. They want there to be objective lore that is cool, but also that their ideas come in, and it can be a difficult process to pitch a setting that way.
I suppose there's a lot of different approaches to even the two, let's call them sides of this. Say a very a very detail heavy setting, Harn World. It has been going for decades, and the policy from the start, as far as I understand it, is that any book you pick up for Harn is stops at a certain date. Like, it is showing the world of Harn at a particular start date. And it's a fairly medieval world. Depending on where you are in it, you're going to see more or less magic. Some kingdoms seem to barely have any. One is ruled by wizards. And the level of detail is huge. There's a lot of characters described, a lot of background described, details of towns, lots and lots of maps. You have a common starting point. Like, you can refer, like, the lore is going to be perfectly accurate up until the point the players get involved, and which is, I think, it's an interesting compromise, because yes, you have all this stuff you can refer to and can use, and it's going to be reliably so, but the players still get to start changing it.
There's the temporal aspect, I think, is another thing we need to come back to. We've set a date that this is the adventure date, and then after that, you can start altering things. And I think that's fine for a lot of people. But I think we're sort of circling the drain on there's the certain level of canon desire, the hope that there will be an objective way things go. I mean, you see some of this, particularly. Everyone remembers the dark days of Metaplot, right?
Mm-hmm. Plenty of vampire. Shadowrun as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the whole Dunkelzahn death thing, and other plot lines. Like, I don't want to start accusatory, but there is a certain level of I don't want to say the person who reads it more than they play it, but the idea that like the book has a greater life beyond being a tool at the table. That the idea that not only does it all fit together into one cohesive world, but it fits together into one cohesive narrative that is ongoing. It sets off things in your brain in certain folk to different degrees. And the idea that this is all the things we purchase and use in this game are all part of the great coherent narrative of Vampire or Shadowrun or Second Ed D&D or what have you. I think that has a certain level of appeal to people, but the question is, does that actually make the games better?
Like in my experience, players like, or maybe it's the players I've been hanging out, like their actions to have affected the world, and things like meta plot are a bit of a double-edged sword in that, depending on whether the creators are taking, say, player input on board. Like Legend of the Five Rings card game, from what I recall, actually had the effects of tournaments affect the ongoing plot.
Hmm.
So there was a very direct correlation between what players were up to and what happened with the storyline. Apparently, there was a tour. Oh, I can't remember the name of the arch villain at the time, but there was an envelope with basically evil wins that apparently there was a few cheers in the dev team as they burned it, because they was no longer needed.
Damn. Yeah, there is sort of the thing is just like of people wanting to affect the narrative, but also liking the idea that the narrative goes beyond their table, that they're part of a larger ongoing thing.
Hmm.
It's just a question of, should you be writing to give a sense of this, or should you be should you be writing your games to make this actually true? And
Hmm.
it's a tricky one to because you're again a lot of this is dealing with feeling. People like the feeling of, oh, this world's better, or it's not just stuff that our GM made up of a Saturday. There's something stronger as part of this. But at the same time, they want to have their own creativity shine through. And that's why I think generally Metaplot has been tried and sort of discarded as going a little bit too far. The idea that one supplement will lead to the other turned out to not actually be useful among the players. I mean, have you ever met any people who defended the Metaplot or just liked referencing it?
I've trouble remembering any running into anyone who actively defended the meta plot, but there did seem to be people more accepting of it as a concept.
Yeah.
I did run into a GM who would only use pre-published modules for D&D, refused to write any himself.
Hmm. And was that because they didn't feel confident or because they.
They seemed competent. They'd been GMing for a long time, from like in the States and in Ireland, but I suspect they were more used to pulling out modules and just preferred that.
Hmm. Well, I did. Well, I suppose you probably didn't play with them enough to really notice, but did they have any habit of alt? Did they play as written? I guess is the question I'm trying to ask.
Yes, but like they seem to make use of a lot of NPCs. Say that at one point an undead frost giant joined the party, like a zombie basically, and was getting a share of the XP. I wasn't in that campaign, so I'm not too familiar with the details, but like, so stuff was happening that I'm pretty sure wasn't in the original modules, but it did seem that they were the starting point, if nothing else.
So yeah, in this case, we're seeing a situation where the adventure module is a jumping off point for the table. That the thing, like it is a framework, and with that framework, the GM feels more confident about bringing on the nonsense that the player characters are doing.
Hmm.
They have a selection of relevant NPCs, they have a selection of plots, and they have a selection of locations, and they feel more confident that the writers of the scenario have built something cohesive. Presumably, they're afraid that if they just start putting stuff together, that their tables like that, their table might like the thing more, but it won't be as cohesive. It won't feel as real. That's where I'm trying to say that the level of objectivity that having someone else publish something gives. The distance is important to people. The idea that it's not just their nonsense, and then of course you get a whole bunch of GMs who are very much about their nonsense, and a bunch of playgroups who love, a little bit of sadistic glee when their nonsense that they come up the table derails the whole objective out of party plot that has been thrown in.
Yeah, I mean, there, there was a third edition game I was in where we collectively, as the players, managed to, how was it described, wreck the plot so thoroughly that there were not one but two instances of time traveling to try and fix things.
Ugh.
Yeah, pretty thoroughly setting plot lines on fire was the description given.
Beautiful fuel for a campaign. But we're also talking about confidence, right? You're saying that your GM friend maybe didn't feel confident that their stuff would be as cohesive as. There's a feeling I feel sometimes when doing something, or reading some supplement or adventure or something. I get the feeling, well, it's just like, okay, there's something written on the page, but that just makes me a little bit angry, and I want to do it right. I want to take this premise and make my own version of it. And that is also a strong impulse amongst the particularly, the GMing side of things. But is that hubris? Or, I mean, maybe a little bit of hubris is good?
I suppose I'm a believer in whatever works at that given table. So long as everyone's having, good, clean fun, and that can work. You have GMs who are very easygoing, and you have GMs who aren't interested in anything but railroads and everything in between. But we're digressing a little bit because you can have a railroad with very little in the way of setting detail,
Hmm.
and you can have very open-minded GMs accepting player creativity at all steps and create an awful lot of background. There are games which actively encourage players to create chunks of background as part of character creation, as in my character's from this kingdom over the mountains,
Hmm.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, and sometimes there are even mechanical benefits for choosing this tie over that tie or this background over that background. But then, do you not risk the chance of disappointment? I guess is one of this is where you have your sort of more lore houndy player who has made himself, say, one of the Purple Dragon Knights of Cormyr, and then it's just like they've got this whole backstory, elaborate things, and then the adventure goes to Cormyr, and the GM is just using the most generic the plot lines. There's no local color. There's just here's King Boobly Bob, and it's just like the entire royal family of Cormier is done out on this table in this book. Why not reference at least an oblique reference to that would be helpful. But the GM having being mostly motivated by a plot line or an adventure or a location on the other side of Cormier has not really worried too much about this thing, even though it has great value to the player themselves.
I suppose the thought that comes to mind is that there's a mismatch here of expectations, a very bad one.
Like it's just stuff like that. It's just, the Forgotten Realms in particular, in its newfound, well, not newfound, it's like since 2003, its role as the generic version of D&D has found itself in a very odd point because if you just buy your average Forgotten Realms supplement, yeah, you'll get a generic fantasy setting where the town is here, this town has this thing in it, and here's an NPC or two, here's the Harpers, they don't like bad things and like good things, and it'll be fine if people run away, run their own campaigns as they see fit. But Forgotten Realms is one of those fractal settings where if you stare at any given bit long enough, you'll find, oh, Ed Greenwood has written 3 articles about this region, or oh, there was a Dragon Magazine article about this, oh, or there was a moderately well-selling 5 novel series about going between these 2 locations, and just so happens that your player is a big fan of that and was really hoping you'd reference it, but instead you just put out the random encounter table and had some goblins show up. And the whole point of the novels is that the goblins have been genocided by the bullywugs or whatever.
My response to that would be one, I'm not so sure it was a good idea for D&D's default setting to be Forgotten Realms and it being that detailed. Like having a less detailed setting as or partial setting as the as the default might have been more accommodating of various playstyles with the option of picking up Forgotten Realms supplements. But also, if that level of detail isn't straightforwardly accessible to a GM, who might not know of the amount of detail available in what's supposed to be a default setting, then I'm not sure that's entirely, it's entirely fair to be knocking a GM for that.
Yeah, that's sort of the issue. It's just like Forgotten Realms lore, a lot of it is locked away in second-hand modules. I don't think the grand tales of the Dale lands and the eternal guerrilla warfare against the evils in Tarim, I don't think that is like front and center of your fifth ed sword ghost book. It's stuff that's written over a whole bunch of second ed supplements, which are technically still available on the DM's Guild, but if your minimum buy-in for running a game in a setting is that the GM not only has to do a wiki dive on the fan wiki for the location, but then has to go buy a whole bunch of PDFs to reference while going through it. Right, some GMs do like that research, but I don't think the default should be.
Oh, that's a massive. Like, first of all, that's a massive time investment, and even just to read over that stuff and to collate it, to memorize it all, or to even know where everything is so you can look it up, that's a lot of effort. Like, on top of actually running the game.
Now, I have done that level of effort before for my Greyhawk game. I have done, the book dives, the wiki dives, reading up on various different people's interpretations of the Greyhawk lore. Very little of it actually ended up being vital to the actual game that happened. Like the players were not super invested in, oh, this is where Great Battle of Emberdy Meadows happened, and these are the Rangers of Gnarlywood, or any of those things. They were just like, oh, these are the Rangers. This is the town. These are the locations.
Mm,
So it helped me add a little bit of spice to the thing, but it wasn't vital. Mainly as an intellectual exercise for me, which I appreciated at the time, and it had helped make the world a little bit more coherent. But in the end, I wouldn't say it added a lot. But if I had a Greyhawk Lorehound in the party, maybe they would have been popping off all the time. It's hard to know.
yeah, I mean, like we often recommend, it's worth spending the time and effort to get everyone synced up on their expectations, as in what they think is going to happen in this game that's happening.
And what happens if you do have the Lorehound in your group, and they do really think that they want the thing? Like if you have someone who's really, really, really into a setting, and they're not the GM, I would really think that you should have them as a little bit of consultant for the thing.
Yeah, I mean, GMs can always use support. Support your GM.
Exactly. But I think one of the things is, this is the eternal problem. I think this is my version of the talk to your players thing. Is I think there's an awful lot of the problem is unknown until it's actually already happened.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a fair point.
The player sort of secretly had read, like, or when the campaign started they decided to go on Wiki Dive and read all the novels and such like, and then they come around to things, and then that's when they start saying, "Oh, I thought there was going to be Purple Dragon Knights here. I thought there was going to be references to the Shadow Dales or the burning of the envelope or whatever. Like I thought all that stuff was going to happen here because it seemed really cool, and that seemed to be the unique selling point of setting it here. But now we're just sort of using bits here, bits there, and not detailed. And in that case, like where do you go there? We say to have proper adult conversations, but do you have that in the middle of a game?
I yeah, no, it's a fair question, and it's possibly a bit of a sweepy assumption that all this could be caught ahead of time.
Yeah.
I would say such conversation should probably happen in between games, if at all possible. But yeah, that's always going to be a tricky one. I'm just thinking about a kind of a different, like an example of a setting I think works pretty well in terms of balancing the two extremes. Dark Heresy First Edition had the Calixis sector, and a sector of Imperial space in Warhammer 40,000 in the Imperium of Man is a large place. It's quite a considerable number of light years, roughly cube shaped, very roughly. So you could easily have 100, 200 or more inhabited worlds in that region. So what Dark Heresy First Ed does is it names a good chunk of worlds. Not all of them, because the map only shows a fraction of the worlds that are there, by emission. It goes into brief descriptions of several of these worlds. A few of the worlds get much more detailed descriptions, or at least parts of them do. Like, say, a hive city, or a hive city here, or a temple complex here. And there's description of organizations which work sector wide. But there's an awful lot of hooks. There's an awful lot of adventure seeds. If you want to deep dive into the areas that are detailed in the set, you can. If you can run a game entirely on the sector capital, and you have enough material to work with for quite a while. But if you want to create an entirely new world, literally, and slap it down somewhere in the sector, you're absolutely entitled to do that, and it makes sense because not every world has even been named or put on maps.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very good thing. The only pitfall I would say that might be there is you don't want to be say, oh, you have a new Forge world and you say, oh, this is the greatest forward world in the sector and it produces all the stuff, and then your Loreheim player goes, actually there's like 3 planets called the Lathe Worlds. They're kind of a big deal. They got their own Skitarii regiments and all that, and
That makes sense.
yeah. So gaps for creativity are very useful, and I think that having a setting like 40k where it's immense size and ponderousness permits that. That's a big advantage of that kind of setting. But at the same time, you do have some lore of where you're setting things, and if you do have a Clicks a Second fan in your game, you don't need to go beyond what's in the main book, which says these worlds, these worlds, these worlds. This is the important place. This is the religious planet. And this is where they make all the tanks. Just have the broad strokes that are in the main rulebook will probably just something to reference as you put together the particular world that you're interested in. But I guess the issue there is you get sort of circling back to a previous point. Is there are places where it appears you have gaps, but actually you don't. Like, I don't know if this has ever really happened, but what if there's someone who buys just the main Horn World book and says, well, we're going to go slightly west of the map here, and someone pulls out the super detailed supplement book showing what is actually there and has nothing to do with the GM had imagined.
Oh, well, I'd say the gym's well within their rights to say, okay, you've caught, I don't have much prepared for that, so we can wing it, or you can lend me that book, and I'll brush up on it, in between sessions.
Yeah.
You can't reasonably expect somebody to have prepared for every possibility, even in a detailed game.
Yeah. But at the same time, I would not be as worried about someone doing that in the likes of Hard, because the big appeal of Hard is its super detailed nature.
Sure. Yeah. No,
If you're going into a Hard campaign, presumably you didn't buy it by accident, or not realize it was part of a bigger thing, and then just sort of stumbled into this problem. But if you're in, say, Forgotten Realms, and that's more of an issue. But as I said, we've tried to go over the various solutions, and I do think one of the big ones is telling people, or asking your players, like, how important is this to do, and maybe check in to say, this is like, because a lot of people who love lore but are still, if you explain it to them they'll still be reasonable to say, we're not playing in the Forgotten Realms, we're playing in Dave's campaign, and if he says that Cormier doesn't have any knights, it's actually just a whole bunch of dragon men, well, we can blame it on the fourth ed retcons.
it's a Forgotten Realms.
Yeah. And ultimately, here's a little secret, it's always going to be your Forgotten Realms. There's no amount of someone wrote in a book 30 years ago that is ultimately going to weigh on your campaign. It is, there's no amount of, there's a wiki somewhere explaining this, is going to fix your campaign's problems for it. Still, ultimately, you're at your table with your players, and the problems that you're facing in your game are ones that you have to be responsible for. And in that context, lore should be used as a tool. It should be used as inspiration. It should be used as a way to make the game feel more connected, cool, cohesive, and all of that. But ultimately, all lore is opt-in, and if something needs to be changed for your game, the people at your table and are the people who decide that.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a great take.
Okay, so if you, dear listeners, have a 4,000 page wiki explaining how we're wrong about your precious setting,
Mail it in. We might have a gawk or add it to the GM inspiration pile.
yes. And of course, our Discord's right there if you'd like to rant at us, or, explain just how vital it was that we got Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate mixed up in episode 308. But until then, we have been the Adventuring Party.
And this party is over.
Thanks for listening to the Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventureparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike and version 3 license.